podcast is powered by PKF. PKF, your trusted advisor in the Hunter for over 45 years. Down to Business acknowledges the traditional owners of the land and waters this podcast is recorded on.
Hi guys, and welcome to Down to Business. I'm your host Andrew Beattie. Today we've got something a little bit different. We've got Loong from Skilldare joining us. Skilldare you might have recognised way back in the early days of doing these things, and we planned on doing one or two or three, and now we've done quite a few more, and it's taken its own journey. Di was one of our guests, so I think I might even say that now she's probably the first person to return, so a bit of a celebrity status. Yeah. But I guess at the moment with so much going on in the business community around labour, people trying to retain them, trying to recruit them, shortages, wage pressure, etc. Thought very timely to get Di back on here and give us a few things that she's seeing in the market, but also what we might be able to utilise as business owners to get the best out of our team, get the best people on board and get good business outcomes. So welcome, Di.
Thanks, Andrew. Pleasure to be here.
So just a bit of a refresher for people that may not have seen the prior episode. Skilldare and now Omnia as well.
Yes.
Tell me a bit about, what is the consulting in the HR space and how do you work with businesses?
So we're a fully outsourced HR consultancy company. A lot of people, when they say, does that mean you're in recruitment? And the quick answer is no, we're not a recruitment company. So we do pretty much everything else. So we work with small to medium-sized organisations, typically predominantly in the Hunter Valley, but we do have clients all over the state. And essentially with it, we're their outsourced HR department. So we do everything from contracts, policies. We help them navigate very tricky people issues. We help them with their people strategies. So everything to do with people we do in organisations.
I think I might refine that even more because in my experience, we work with a lot of business owners, whether it be in a consulting sense, an ongoing sense, etc. You mention HR to people, and you see the brain ticking, and what does that mean? And I mean, of course, people put a meaning to what their experience is, but I would go as far as saying most people think HR is hiring and firing.
Definitely,
which yes, that's an element, but there's so much more.
Much more.
What is a good approach to HR when we're talking about people?
Yeah. A good approach to HR. So if we're onboarding a new client, for example, the first thing we do is, the number one thing we do is look at their compliance first off. It's a critical part of the business. So looking at particularly around payroll, workers' compensation, those kind of things. Have they got the right contracts in place? Have they got the right processes around anti-bullying, harassment, those kind of things, psychological well-being in the workplace. So they're all the real risk factors. So compliance, all the best practice HR doesn't mean a thing if you're not paying your people correctly, for example. So compliance is always the first place we start. And then we build upon that. We have really good, robust policies in place. So everybody understands the rules of engagement, right? They know what the code of conduct is in the workplace, etc. And we have good, robust policies that we can use to help manage people, realign expectations, etc. So policies do form a very, very good foundation for a good HR framework. Then we build on that, and we build robust recruitment processes, for example, onboarding processes, performance management processes. So all of those kind of things that are really critical to the ongoing management and engagement with...
And I'll just jump in there. Processes, you mean, I guess, from a point of view of giving consistency?
Exactly.
And adhering to a certain standard or expectation?
Right. Exactly, yeah. And it's also consistency is a huge thing, but it also gives, leaders in the organisation a process to use that is simple. We're very, very big on keeping it simple because we know most people are not HR trained in organisations. So it's about keeping things really, really simple and making sure consistency is the key. They're making sure every manager, regardless of what area they're in the business, is utilising feedback mechanisms and giving feedback and setting expectations and also being able to recruit properly. And so having all those systems in place are really critical. Because the thing is that it's about engaging people too. So if I know I'm getting regular feedback from you because we've got processes in the organisation to do that, then I'm going to feel more engaged as an employee. And I'm not talking about, really clunky, robotic methods of process. It's actually keeping it very fluid. And that's where I guess a lot of organizations don't necessarily always get it right, is that they've overly structured methods of giving feedback. In other words, they only do it once a quarter, or they only do it twice a year.
Or they don't do it.
Or they don't do it at all, exactly, more the point.
Too hard.
Yeah. So it's putting in processes and mechanisms to actually keep it very fluid, but also keeping it consistent as well. And there's an art to that, of keeping that simple.
Yeah, I guess so. So we'll get into some of the detail in a minute, but I guess from HR, people are probably thinking, well, I've got that covered, you know. But like most people that go into business, most don't get business training.
That's right.
And even more specifically, I guess they don't get HR training.
Correct.
And for me, I guess the dynamic of the industrial relations world is so ever changing.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
convoluted.
Yes.
You know, realistically, it's having sort of an inner voice in using someone like yourself to sort of go, well, guys, you need to be looking at this, or this is a change, and still carry it out yourself. Because I know you work with a lot of businesses where you're not just replacing HR, you might be complementing their internal team, etc.
Yeah, that's right. I think compliance, so going to the industrial relations space, that with the change in government, with the Labour government, it really did make some huge changes too. It's the IR laws are usually the first area that any change in government goes to, is workplace relations, and there has been really significant changes that has really impacted the way employers manage their employees and manage their industrial relations risk. So there's been a lot of changes in the enterprise agreements, for example. So there's a lot of employers out there that don't realise now with some of the changes in that they can easily get roped in to enterprise agreements, where they don't necessarily then have a lot of control over.
So again, for a lot of the viewers, we hear that word at enterprise agreements.
Yes.
What is an enterprise agreement?
So an enterprise agreement is essentially an agreement that covers the majority of employees within that business, and it sets out the employment conditions across. So it sets out consultation, how you ought to consult with employees, pay rates, leave obligations, a lot of things that are typically covered in an award. But it's an overarching agreement that covers the organisation, and it has classifications in it similar to an award. But it's an agreement between the people and the employer, and it gets ratified at Fair Work. So it usually has anywhere between a 3 and a 4 year sort of time frame. And it's got, usually pay increases built into it every year and so forth. But it's typically negotiated between the employees and the employer. And it obviously...
With recent changes, as you're saying, the employees can... I'm not to say that there's a coup on, but they can effectively, across multiple businesses, can bandy together to get an outcome.
Correct, and that's what typically the unions are looking at doing now as well. It's looking at like for like businesses. So you could have an engineering business, just as an example, that is in the Hunter Valley. There could be a number of engineering businesses with 50 or 60 or 70 or plus employees. And one might have an enterprise agreement, and like for like businesses, then the union can then go to the other employees to say, hey, we've got this, there's a really good enterprise agreement over here, let's talk about roping these other organizations into it as well. So and so there is lots of powers for the union to be able to rope, put applications in to rope other organizations in. So it's about employers understanding some of the risks around that, and we've got some clients who've actually tried to get ahead of the curve and actually have gone forward, who previously never had an enterprise agreement in place and really didn't have any interest in having an enterprise agreement, but have actually moved forward with that to prevent them getting potentially roped in to an enterprise agreement.
So being proactive rather than waiting for something maybe.
That's right. So they were trying to take control over what their enterprise agreement was going to look like, rather than potentially inheriting somebody else's.
Yeah, I think the key thing for me when we look at people generally and team members, etc., and I wouldn't be in a business without people. I think it is absolutely unbelievable. But I guess forces outside of your control, such as legislation or governments or competition, etc., I guess give rise to making sure you should be proactive when it comes to your strategy around people. And I think when you look at how from an accounting point of view, the bean counters, I won't say I'm a bean counter anymore, but from that point of view, you go, well, how do we recognise employees? And they're either an expense or a liability, and a set of financials.
Yeah.
Yet without employees and without team members, we don't have our business.
Yeah.
So, I mean, to me, it's actually, we need to look at this and say, well, how do we get the best team? How do we work together in the best way? How do we get the best outcomes? Because the cost of recruiting, the cost of, turnover, the investment you make is significant, so you want to get it right.
That's right. And I think employers when you hear HR strategy, you think of this mammoth sort of thing that gets very intertwined, and it's all fluffy and it doesn't have structure to it. It couldn't be further from the truth. And I think regardless, particularly when you get into a meaty size, when you're 30, 40, 50 plus employees, having a HR strategy is really important, but it doesn't have to be complex. So it ultimately looks at what is the end goal? What do we want to achieve? Do we want to be an employer of choice? Do we want to be able to attract really good people, have a fabulous reputation in industry, whatever industry we're in terms of attracting good clients, but also attracting good people and hanging on to them and growth? Is that kind of, and that's ultimately what most of us want, right? Is growth, retention, attraction. And so it's so if that's the end goal, then what do we have to do in order to achieve that? So it all starts with recruitment, right? So recruitment and selection, do we have simple recruitment practices in place? So do we have good position descriptions? So are we selling the role? Because we've had clients in the past, Andrew, that have churned through people because what they're telling Andrew when he's in the interview and then what the job that Andrew actually comes into is quite different. So Andrew's kind of going, what the hell am I doing here? And then bolts 2 months later. And then it's this churn again. And then they're kind of wondering what's going wrong.
Well, and it's probably also the other way too. Like, not the other way, but in that same sense, when we're in an interview process, our employees just going through a standard, interview question that everyone can ask and not really challenging. And therefore,
that's right.
It's not that hard, I don't believe, in a one meeting sense to sell yourself.
Yeah, that's right.
So what are we doing in our interview process as well to ensure we get the best candidates make sure that we're maybe saying no sometimes.
That's right, exactly. So going back to that, so building a strategy, a HR strategy, it starts with, let's look at the recruitment processes. Like, again, it needs to be simple. We're not talking about a really overly complicated process, but look at our recruitment, our selection. Is that fit for purpose? Is it actually representing who we want to be and where we want to go and where we want to be ultimately? So it's looking at that. That's a short-term fix. So if we look at a HR strategy and developing a bit of a strategic plan, let's look at short-term goals, medium-term and long-term. So the actions that we've got to take in order to ultimately achieve what we want to achieve from a workforce planning and from a people strategy. Recruitment is the first thing we look at. Look at our processes. Are they fit for purpose? We can fix those quite quickly. Then we look at the onboarding, and that's part of that. So we look at our onboarding process. What does that look like? And that includes position descriptions and making sure that what we're selling to you is what we're giving you when you come on board. Then it's looking at our leadership, which is more of a medium term. It's looking at making sure that our leadership is trained adequately enough to give you clear accountabilities and to give you lots of feedback and to make sure that they're engaging with you.
I think that's a really good one. Sorry to interrupt,
That's
but
okay.
you just struck a chord. The amount of people that get promoted into a manager role or a leadership role because they've been there the longest or they're the most technical, all these sort of reasons.
Loyal.
That's right. They're attached to their, it's more attached to, I guess, what they've achieved in the field of delivery. As opposed to are they fit for a management role? And, like I see people that go, you really don't like people, yet you've been put in this people. So I guess it's that training part.
It's so critical.
It's so important. And even probably before that, understanding, the personality traits and what makes them up. And are they in the right position?
That's right. And that goes, you're absolutely entirely right. And it's a two-way thing. So if you're looking at promoting people, and we're starting to say this more and more to clients, there's two ways you can promote somebody. One is to put them into a leadership role where they've got responsibility for a team, right? Now that's a whole set of skills and development that's required there. You can also put somebody into a leadership role where they're a subject matter expert. So they might be an exceptional engineer or an exceptional scientist or whatever it might be. But their specialization, they've got a leadership role where they provide support to the broader organisation, but from a technical perspective, not necessarily, because some people are technically brilliant and are so valuable to the organisation, and we can promote them through a technical channel as opposed to a leadership channel. So they can still be compensated and remunerated and given prestige and all the things that goes along with promotion and progression through an organisation. But again, that's part of our strategy.
Well, and that's about understanding what people want.
Correct.
And that's that training to actually, how do you get out of people?
That's right.
What they
Yeah.
want?
And that forms part of the medium-term HR strategy. So when we're looking at our succession plan, we're bringing great people on now. We've worked out how to do that. How do we retain them? How do we ensure that from a succession plan that Andrew is going to make a great leader, but Di potentially might be, maybe we'd look at progressing, and maybe Di kind of, I don't want to manage people. I just want to stick doing what I'm doing. I really like my engineering role or whatever it is. But how do I hang on to Di, because she's very important to the business, and how do we promote her through that where she's still very valuable to the organisation?
Well, it's being bespoke, isn't it, as opposed to one size fits all, and how do we play to our strengths to get those best outcomes?
Correct.
I think the best, one of the things that you said there, I want to clarify for people, structure and strategy is a key thing, because I think that creates clarity.
Yes,
and
correct.
In my mind, clarity creates confidence, and confidence creates trust.
Yes.
So if we're looking at people, working with people, trust is in relationship is such a key part.
It's absolutely everything, yeah.
So we'll come back and touch on some of those points. I think you raised some really good points. Let's talk market at the moment, but we're in a very interesting time. I mean, it feels like we're still saying, COVID, but I know there's a spike of COVID cases.
Yeah, there is, yeah.
But that, I think, is something we live with. If we talk about that period where life was very different, that is, almost 18 months, probably even near 2 years ago now, we're still using that hang-up. I personally think it's not related to COVID, it's a new market. But if anything, people are taking new roles, they're working differently. Yep. I know our industry is very much under pressure with just less people available.
Yes.
What are you seeing in the market from a point of view of labour generally, retaining people, more around, I guess, the specific human capital as opposed to the legislation?
I think the market's very tight, definitely, and particularly I think in the professional field, the market's very, very tight. So I think retention is an absolute, and I think there is some surveys have been done, and you're reading the research. We're constantly reading and seeing surveys all the time, and one of the biggest challenges for employers at the moment is retention of staff, particularly professional staff. It's very, very hard to attract and retain. I think there was huge surges of the money and the REM that was being demanded by, I guess, candidates. I think that's settling down a little bit. I think that which is we're grateful from an employer perspective, but I think definitely retention is definitely ought to be one of the number one strategies and priorities for organisations into the future.
Yeah, because I guess I know what we're saying from a retention point of view. It's not necessarily you're losing people to competitors, for argument's sake. We've got an exodus from the industry. Yep. So it's how do you make sure that you understand what you're offering, as you said before, what your people are after. Making that a positive planning conversation as opposed to getting the little surprise, can I see you for a minute, or here's a letter.
Correct, And we're seeing a real increase in, and we're encouraging our clients as well, but we have seen an increase in engagement surveys and employers, because we're saying don't just assume that Andrew is happy. Don't just assume that because you give him a pay rise, it's going to hang on to him. Don't just assume that that's what's going to be motivating Andrew. So ask the question. So it's really, really important from an engagement perspective. And this is, again, forms part of the HR strategy. It's part of the journey, but making sure we don't just make assumptions that money is going to be, or flexibility, if I allow him to work one day at home a week, that's going to keep him happy. It's because it comes down to good leadership as well. I think without question, leadership plays a huge part in retaining people. So money definitely plays a part, particularly at the moment. Interest rates and mortgages and cost of living has skyrocketed. We've all felt that. So I think to say that money is not important is not correct. I think money at the moment is very important to people just because of mortgage stress, etc. But it also comes down to that feeling of engagement as well.
Well, and I think it's also generational change that I think 5 years ago, maybe a bit longer, and for quite a number of years, money was like fourth or fifth.
Yeah.
I've never got anyone to do anything for free. But, money was like fourth or fifth on what they some of the surveys.
Yeah.
It's always about learning development and challenging work and this sort of stuff. Well, I've noticed in recent times, money's right up there.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I guess, as you say, like it's not always about everything, but that still comes back to you need to make sure you understand what's motivating your people, what's important to them.
I recently came across a matter where there was an employee who's been with the business for a number of years, and one of the best performers, is well paid. But in recent years, since COVID, they've brought new people into the business that have been paid substantially more to attract them in, right? Because wages salaries increased. So we've got this chap now sitting who's a substantially better performer than the others, who's earning less because he's been with the business longer and he wasn't attracting.
It's like a bank, isn't it?
Yeah. But now he's feeling undervalued, and he's one of their best performers. But he's feeling undervalued because he knows he's getting paid less than other people that are not performing as well. So again, it's for employers, it's being really mindful. Now, I'm not suggesting go and throw money left, right and centre, but it's being really mindful of the fact that you've got this loyal, unbelievably good performer that's not earning the same as others because they were just lucky enough to come in when, demand was high and supply was low, and they just benefited from that. But from an optics, from his perspective, he feels really undervalued now, and he's looking to leave. So,
and what's the cost of that?
It's huge because he is such a good performer. He will be a huge loss to the business. So it's for employers to keep just being mindful and just really keeping close tabs from a people perspective, because it's reasons like that people leave.
And then some of this is just that structure you talk about. I mean, it's not like I know myself. All too often when you're talking people issues. Like or lump it, you deal with a lot of probably the downside.
Yeah.
But there's also then having that sort of, I guess, strategies we said, but then the hygiene factors around, diarising your performance reviews or your catch-ups, having, a constant reporting on relativities around salaries and that sort of thing. I mean, it's not the sexy stuff necessarily.
That's right.
It's stuff you need to make sure, and it just needs to be structured so you don't forget it or don't get complacent.
Correct, yeah. And following up as well, I think it's just really being mindful and following up. It's parenting, right? It's just making sure that, are the kids happy? Are we doing the right thing for them? Have they got the right tools and equipment? Are they feeling engaged? Are they feeling valued? All of those kind of things. It's very, very easy. I mean, I run a very busy business too, and I've got to really, really force myself to kind of stop sometimes and pause to say, okay, you get so busy just in the business as usual stuff that, sometimes we forget to say thank you, or to say, have I reviewed what this person is getting paid? And, and we actually look at as well at Skildare, we do from time to time when our employees are doing something really exceptional, or we've seen a huge increase through professional development, and rather than wait till June to kind of often we'll sit down and have a chat with them mid-year or out of kind of the normal, outside of the cycle, and actually say we want to recognise what you're doing. And those kind of things are really important, because that way we're going to hang on to them, we're going to reward them and actually say we recognise that what you've done in the last 6 months has been exceptional, and we can see such an improvement.
Yeah, and you've also got then, in addition to that, incentives and that sort of thing, and saying, well, and I think when we talk about, incentive, people think, oh, large cash bonus, no, it doesn't have to be.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I know we've got a trophy made up to recognise people for doing something great, to coffee vouchers, to lunches, to, some decent holidays and that sort of thing, all around the business winning as well.
Yeah.
But it's a great thing to say, hey, you know what? We're valued.
Correct.
And more importantly, this day with socials and the generation we're talking about, it gets shared quite often.
Yeah, that's right.
So it's actually a business positive.
Yeah, that's right. And they're all the things that you should build into your people strategy. Just have some deliberate actions that you do, as part of, and they're quick, easy wins. They're not expensive, doesn't take a lot of time, but they make all the world of difference. They really do.
It is, and I think again, we need to sit there and see the forest from the trees a bit. We talk. It always resonates with me. I've got a very good client that we did a management buyout with, and he spoke to all these the buyers about the most important things in business. I had a lot of time for this person, but I had quite the debate. He said the three important things in business are customers, and customers.
Yeah.
And I could see where he was coming from.
Yeah.
But for one, how do you think those people felt?
Yeah.
But more importantly, I said, well, it's not true. The most important thing is people.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because, and please don't take this the wrong way, but customers are absolutely important. But if your people aren't right, your customers are stuffed.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Exactly.
So we need to get this right to actually deliver.
Yeah, I
to
couldn't agree more.
Our channels.
Yeah. Yeah, and no offense to customers, and clients, but I 100% agree. I love our clients at Skilled, don't get me wrong, but my employees are number one to me, because I know, and our clients are unbelievably important to me, don't get me wrong, and we will move heaven and earth to do what we can for our clients, but unless our employees are happy, and unless we onboard really positive clients too, if we had a client that was incredibly difficult to deal with, for example, and was in opposition to our values, we wouldn't work with them, because I wouldn't want my employees to kind of go, I'm out of here, I can't work with this client, they're awful. So I will take my employee over any client any day of the week, but we love our clients, don't get me wrong, but our employees, if we get that right, we know then they'll do the right thing by the client. So it's the chicken or the egg. It's definitely, and that's a clear line for me. Yeah. That's a very clear line.
No, I agree with that. I think so. With that in mind, we then need to look at our employee value proposition.
Yes.
We've spoken a lot about, I guess, the initial part of HR is around compliance and risk.
Yeah.
And very important.
Very important.
Extremely important. I guess that's setting the floor.
The foundations, the framework. Yeah, that's right.
But then when you're looking, employee value proposition and EVP, or it gets a lot of market, I guess, press around this sort of stuff. But it's true. Like, at the end of the day, what is our value we offer people?
Yep.
Why would you come and work for us? Yep. And in my experience, people do, like a lot of business owners offer a lot, but they don't articulate it very well.
That's correct. Yeah. Or they're not consistent with it. So, and this is the part, I guess, that sometimes can seem a bit hazy and a bit sort of big and fluffy, is the employee value proposition. But it comes down to all the stuff we've just been talking about, by the way. The employee value proposition starts at the recruitment and making sure that what I promise you when you come and work for me is what you get, right? It's about good leadership. I mean, I'm always banging on about leadership, but everything starts and finishes with leadership. It's about having good leaders in the business, because you won't have a good employee value proposition without good leaders being able to engage and make me feel valued in the organisation. It's about having a strong set of values and making sure that they are embedded in everything you do, right? And holding people accountable to values. We all have values. Most of us don't even talk about them. They're on our website. They're scattered around a few documents here and there, but it's actually living and breathing our values is really, really important. It's having those reward mechanisms in place. And again, it's not just, we're not talking, as you rightly said a few moments ago, about constantly just churning out, throwing money at people, but it's having reward mechanisms and recognition mechanisms in place to making sure that people are feeling valued. And sometimes that's just a simple conversation and taking time. They say the most valuable thing you can give your kids is your time. It's exactly the same with leadership. So it's me taking the time to sit and say, I recognise and observed you've done an amazing job with that client, Andrew, and my heartfelt thanks. And I think you've represented the organisation, you've represented our company brilliantly. That's gold, And when they come from a place that is genuine and real, that goes a long way. That's an employee value proposition, right? So it's putting in, and it's making sure that we train our leaders as well and train our managers to recognise when you're struggling. So to recognise if somebody's having a hard time at home for whatever reason, is feeling under the pump at work for whatever reason, recognising that and being able to have a conversation around that to say, what can we do? What can we take off you? What can we change? So again, and we do this constantly at Skilled Air as well, where we're in a stressful job. We're dealing with people all the time. We're putting out bushfires for a lot of our clients a lot of the time, so it can be stressful. So we are always mindful of looking at the well-being of our employees, and when we identify that they might be struggling or under the pump or feeling overwhelmed, we deal with it as soon as we possibly can.
And I think these days, the buzzword of the last few years has been well-being. And it's great that we're talking more about mental health and that sort of thing. But we need to put into action. I had Dylan Edwards on this a while ago, who's in this place and goes, it's great that there's awareness, but that's all it is. We need to actually get action.
Correct.
And that's what comes in part of this. I think some of that is, you talk about leaders, and leaders aren't just by title, but what's our mentoring like? What's our check-ins like? Do we really care for and how do you show that when you're talking to a market?
It's actually making people feel safe to talk about it, right? And that comes through our leadership and training. So it's from a well-being perspective, training our leaders and getting people to understand what mental illness is, for example. Lots of different types of mental illness. But it's getting people to be comfortable talking about it, because there's people feel, stressed for various reasons. It could be financial stress, it could be marital stress, it could be fertility stress, it could be, there's a million and one, they suffer from anxiety or from various other mental illness. I mean, every single workplace has it. Every single workplace. So we're fools to think that none of our employees suffer from that. Of course, it's in every workplace, and mental illness impacts us at different times of our life as well, depending on what's going on in the dynamics of our life. So the critical thing is, and we see a lot of, we see a diminishing performance when somebody is suffering mentally for whatever reason, through anxiety, depression, whatever. There is absolutely diminish in their performance, in their absenteeism, increases and all that kind of thing. So it's being able to identify, to say, I've seen a change in this person. I've seen they're more, their performance is not there. They've kind of, they're crawling into a shell. They're not as engaged for whatever reason. So it's being able to make them safe enough to talk to their manager about it, or their manager having the confidence to actually sit down to say, are you okay?
Well, and I guess it's also, if you've got that strategy.
That's right.
You have, this is how we handle it, because, as I said, whilst it's been the buzzword, or and for a few years now, there's also, with anything, a lot of people trying to take advantage of that,
right?
And there's so much out there about well-being, etc. So that strategy would help.
No question about it. It has to form part of, and that goes down to leadership training, and it should form part of that. For leaders to feel comfortable and to feel safe, to have the conversation, are you okay? Because sometimes they'll avoid it because they don't know how to respond. So if Andrew said to me, Di, I'm not okay, then it's kind of like, I don't know how to deal with that, So it's really, but it's also removing the stigma. We talk a lot about mental health. There's still a lot of stigma out there, let's not lie. So it's creating a culture where it's okay to talk about it, and let's deal with it, because the vast majority of the time we can work through a solution to support the employee, to retain the employee, and to get them, to support them through that, so they can come back to the way they were previously. We've seen it in our own organisation. So that's a really critical part of an EVP, because people who are robust, mentally robust, who've never arguably had a mental illness or any mental challenges. That's not to say they might not in 6 months' time, or in 12 months' time, or tomorrow. So people, they do experience different challenges.
Yeah, and I think with all of this, we're seeing that, like legislation, strategy doesn't sit still either, and that's where you've got to be constantly looking at.
Correct.
I guess the other one that I'm seeing, we're in the middle of some of the biggest wealth transition this country's ever seen, with the baby boomer cohort, right in the thick of it, are the selling businesses. There's some massive stats on how many small businesses or SMEs are owned by baby boomers, and they will change hands. Like a big part of that, maximising your value and your outcome, is ensuring your team's sorted, your policies are right, people are on the same page, etc.
Absolutely.
So everything you've been talking about also has a real impact, not only on performance day to day, but that ultimate exit
Yes,
well.
yeah, absolutely, yeah, for sure. And I think absolutely. So I think that from an efficiency perspective, definitely from a risk mitigation, because anyone going into buy a business, obviously the first thing they should look at is all the risk factors around payroll and safety, and what's your workers' comp record like, and all of those things that has massive impact on ultimately the value of a business and the efficiencies around people. But they would look at turnover stats and all those kind of things, that all those hidden costs as well. So I think there is no question people form the biggest part. It's usually the biggest thing you're buying often is the people. So having that strategy absolutely sets you up for much better for a sale. But it also, in terms of, often you'll see with business leaders, it's kind of a slow transition, because what they do is they start taking a longer holiday, for example, or they'll start stepping away a little bit and putting other leadership.
Well, yeah, and that's that leverage piece.
Yes.
So like there'd be so many people that listen and watch this that went into business for more time or more money, etc.
Yeah.
And they're working to the bone. They never get having a proper strategy around this stuff, getting everyone on the same page, that helps you take that holiday and be away from the business and not be that key person.
That's right. And knowing that you've got good people who are managing the business and leading the business well does enable you to be able to step back. And there's, I'm a firm believer that any business owner can, if they put proper simple HR strategy in place, have good leaders, good managers in roles, they can step back. In terms of, it's not to say that they can completely abdicate and never get involved, but they can absolutely go and have a holiday.
Yeah, I agree with that.
If they have good strategy in place.
Agreed, totally.
And it's those leaders who've never had a holiday in 20 years and can't take a long weekend. It's because they don't have their systems and processes in place and to enable them to do that.
Or they're working for the employees rather than the other way around.
Yeah, the tail is wagging the dog.
So I think in this brief discussion, we've seen, we've only scratched the surface.
Yeah, exactly.
We've seen how much is in HR. I think a better way to your people strategy or people capital. But to narrow it down, if people are looking at this and said, okay, I've got to get something in place, what are your top 2 or 3 things that people should be looking at as a quick wins?
Quick wins. I think looking at first understanding where you want to be. What's your end goal? And again, it only has to be a few dot points. It doesn't have to be overly complex. What's your end goal? I would always start at the beginning. So look at your attraction and selection. Look at your leadership. Start investing more time and money and focus on your leadership. Train them, and again, it doesn't have to cost a fortune. Surround them with good mentors. If you can get your leadership operating well, that will transform your business. I can absolutely tell you that. So starting with selecting and attracting the right people, start with your leadership development. There to me, and obviously always compliance. Always do not forget about, and don't assume. From a mitigating of risk, we have so many times, Andrew, that when we've onboarded a client, they go, we pay our people over award, and our payroll is pretty good, and I'm pretty confident that's all in place. And we'll say, we'll just go in and have a little bit of a deep dive, and we discover things that are, and it's not intentional, it is absolutely, it's just that it's complex and they haven't interpreted things right.
Yeah, one other war story, just recently, I did a strategic planning session for a client, and I always do a survey, anonymous survey with the team before it.
Yeah, right.
This client was like that. And the results were going well. So this isn't a business that was not going in the right direction.
Yeah.
They were going really well. But the managing director said, no, our people are great. They love it, blah, blah, blah. The survey come back, and just the one main area that just had overwhelming feedback was in this people in HR space.
Yeah, interesting.
We don't get a chance to give feedback. We never get a chance to talk about our remuneration, et cetera, et cetera. There's a bit of, I guess, first of all, there's a bit of, denial and a bit of pain there, a bit of embarrassment, I guess.
Yeah.
But to the managing director's credit, he got some of your team involved, and things are going swimmingly.
Yeah.
And now he's one of the biggest advocates because the people are on the same page, the people and we're getting better performance.
Yeah.
So, look, I mean, for me, as I said, we could talk about this all day. It's a little bit different because it's a very timely update given what's going on in the market. Just to reiterate, compliance is critical, guys. Processes around your strategy and your HR, I guess, approach is absolutely critical for consistency, and also, for keeping things fluid. You need to make sure you're mitigating risk. have a look, have you got the right people in the right roles? And that requires some homework. That requires looking at what the role is, what the attributes are, and then looking at the person.
Yeah.
And how do we know? That requires a bit of digging, a bit of discussion. You need to articulate your offer properly if you're talking about from a market position. How do we train our people? Are we training them for what their role should be and where the business is going?
Correct.
Or are we just train them in product or technical stuff that we've always done?
That's right.
Your top three things: attraction, selection. Really invest in your leadership, and don't assume around compliance.
Yeah, that's right. And I think just to wrap that all up, it's looking. We talked a lot about HR strategy. It's having short-term wins, medium-term goals, and longer-term goals. So it's being able to just chunk it, and you can chip away slowly at it and get some very, very quick wins very, very quickly that will absolutely transform that engagement piece and that retention piece. And having a focus on medium and long-term goals to ultimately get where you want to go, I think is critical. It doesn't have to be complex.
Yeah, I agree.
But it's really essential.
And I think just to reiterate, a lot of people think having HR internally or an outsourced arrangement, they're mutually exclusive, and they're not. Yes, I think from a business like what Di's involved in has the full HR function for some clients, but likewise, people in a HR position internally are great, but they're just so busy in the weeds in the day-to-day, they need someone to come in and help set the structures up. So to me, it's not a one-size-fits-all. It's very bespoke. It's such an important part of your business that you need to make sure, whether you're a small business, a medium business, a large business, you have a fixed approach. Well, not fixed, it keeps living, but you have an approach and a strategy around your people capital, management. So, look, if you want to know more, Omnia, that's omniahr.com.au or skilledair.com.au, two businesses that Di's involved in. Reach out. Di, thanks for giving us the update and thanks for joining
Pleasure. Thanks so much for having me. It was great. Thank you.
Until next time, guys, cheers.